Oh my God.
The morning sun burned hot and mean across the frontier town of Dust Ridge. It was the kind of heat that made the air shake like water, and the ground was so dry it cracked under every boot step. Doc Harlow sat on his old wooden cart, pulled by two tired horses that had seen better days. He wore a faded hat, patched clothes, and the kind of weathered face that came from a lifetime of hard work and harder choices. Doc was not a rich man. He had maybe $200 to his name, and those dollars were meant to buy one thing: only a strong horse. A workhorse that could pull, could dig, could help him finish the fence work on his small ranch before winter came. He didn't have money to waste. He didn't have time to waste. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. The Dust Ridge auction grounds was crowded that morning. Cowboys came from 3 counties over. Ranchers brought their money. Traders brought their animals. The air smelled like horse sweat, dust, leather, and the smell of men who had been awake since before sunrise. The auction master stood on a wooden platform, a fat man with a loud voice and eyes that saw everything as profit. "Step right up! Step right up!" The auction master yelled, his voice cutting through the noise. "We got good stock today, gentlemen. Strong horses. Fast horses, breeding stock. Don't miss your chance." Doc moved slowly through the crowd. He looked at horses with white stars on their foreheads, horses with strong legs, horses that looked like they had meat on their bones and fire in their eyes. These were good horses. These were horses that would sell for real money. Doc had no chance with these. He waited, he watched. He always waited until the end, when the desperate animals came through. That's where he found his deals. That's where he found the ones nobody else wanted. The auction went on for 2 hours. Horses came and went. Prices climbed higher and higher. Rich ranchers bought good stock. Men with money bought the best animals. And then, near the middle of the afternoon, when the sun had climbed even higher and made everything burn, the mood changed. The auction master raised his hand. "Next up," he said with a different tone in his voice, not excited, but tired. Not eager, but done. "Next up, we got a problem horse. She's been to 4 different ranches in the last 2 years. Been worked hard, worked too hard, some might say. But she won't obey. She won't take the bridle easy. She won't forget her training, if you know what I mean." 2 men with ropes dragged a horse into the auction ring. Doc's breath caught. She was a mare, probably 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8 hands high if she stood straight. But she didn't stand straight. Her neck was bent low, pulled down by years of tension and fear. Her body was thin, not the good thin of a running horse, but the thin of an animal that had been starved and worked at the same time. Her coat was matted and dull, her ribs showed like fences under her skin. And her eyes, her eyes were the worst part, they were empty. Not the empty of a young horse waiting to be broken, but the empty of something that had been broken so many times that the breaking had become the only thing it knew. Her eyes didn't look at the crowd. They didn't look at anything. They just stared at some point far away, as if this whole thing was happening to someone else, as if she wasn't even there. The crowd was quiet. "This one," the auction master said, and even he sounded uncomfortable. "Came from the Blackstone Ranch. Owner said she wouldn't pull straight. Sighed she wouldn't take orders. Said something was wrong with her mind. She's got scars on her neck from the rope. See them?" He pointed with his stick. The crowd leaned in. The scars were deep, white lines that showed old wounds that had healed badly. She's been through 3 different trainers. None of them could break her proper. Doc felt something tight in his chest. He knew what those scars meant. He'd seen them before. "So what am I bid?" The auction master asked, but he didn't yell this time. His voice was flat. "What am I bid for this mare? She's strong enough for heavy work." "Just won't. $1, someone shouted from the back. The crowd laughed. $1 for a full-grown mare? "Come on, gentlemen, she's got good bones." "She's 50 cents, another man said. More laughter. "She's got some years left on her," the auction master tried again, but his heart wasn't in it. "She could be retrained with patience and—" Doc Harlow raised his hand slowly. "I'll give $3 for her," he said. His voice was quiet. The crowd turned to look at him like he was crazy. The auction master blinked. $3? "Well, that's—" "Anyone else?" Going once. Going twice. No one moved. No one wanted to compete. $3 was already too much for this broken thing. Sold to the old man for $3. Doc walked forward. The crowd parted for him like they didn't want to be too close. The two men with the ropes handed them to him like they were passing off something dirty. Doc took the ropes gently. He didn't pull, he didn't command, he just held them and he waited. The mare didn't move. She didn't look at him. She just stood there, trembling slightly, her whole body tight with fear and habit. Doc spoke in a voice so soft that only the mare could hear it. "It's okay, girl," he whispered. "It's okay now. No more pulling today, just walking, just breathing. That's all you got to do." He turned and walked toward his cart. The mare didn't follow at first, but then something shifted. Maybe it was the gentleness in his voice. Maybe it was the way he didn't pull the rope tight. Maybe it was just that she had no other choice. Slowly, carefully, step by painful step, the mare walked behind him. Behind them, the crowd watched in silence. Doc Harlow had just bought the most worthless horse in 3 counties. He had spent 3 of his last dollars. He had no money left for another animal, and he had bought broken. But as he helped the mare onto his cart, watching how she flinched at every touch, how her whole body shook with fear, he understood something that the crowd at the auction would never understand. She wasn't irredeemable. She was just waiting for someone who had time enough to listen.
3 weeks had passed since Doc Harlow brought the mare home to his small ranch. 3 weeks of silence and patience. 3 weeks of waiting to see if she would live, or just exist in the shadows like a ghost of herself. The ranch was small, just 40 acres of rough land, a barn with a leaking roof, a house with wooden walls that had seen better years, and a fence line that was half broken. Doc lived alone. He had no wife, no children, no family that visited. He had only the land and the animals. And that was enough. The mare stayed in the barn at first. Doc didn't force her into the fields. He didn't put a saddle on her back or a rope around her neck tighter than she needed. He just brought her hay, fresh water, and quiet. Every morning, he would enter the barn slowly. He would speak in a soft voice. He would stand near her but not touch her unless she seemed ready. Slowly, very slowly, something began to change. Her ribs were still showing, but less so. Her coat began to shine again. Her legs grew steadier. She started to eat without fear. And then, one morning in the 3rd week, she did something she had never done since arriving. She raised her head when Doc entered the barn. Not high but up. And her eyes, those empty, broken eyes, held something new in them. A question. A small glimmer of wondering. Doc's heart felt like it might break right there in the dust. But he didn't know that everything was about to change in a way he could never have imagined. It was 4 in the morning when Doc woke to a sound he couldn't place. A kind of groaning, low and desperate, that carried across the quiet ranch through the still dark. He lay in bed for a moment, listening. The sound came again. It was coming from the barn. Doc didn't think. He didn't dress slowly. He grabbed his boots and his coat and he ran, his old legs carrying him faster than they had moved in years. The moon was almost gone from the sky, and the world was that deep black that happens right before dawn, when the night is dying but day hasn't been born yet. He reached the barn and threw open the doors. The mare was down on her side in the straw. Her whole body was moving in waves, like something inside her was trying to break free. She was breathing hard, groaning with each wave of pain that moved through her body. Her eyes were wide with panic and effort. And there was sweat, so much sweat, covering her skin like rain. Doc understood in one terrible moment. She was in labor. She was having a baby. No one had told him. The ranches that had owned her before had hidden this. They had kept her moving, kept her working, kept her broken so no one would ask questions. A pregnant mare was a liability. A pregnant mare was something to hide, not something to care for. They had deliberately hidden the truth while letting her body suffer through work that no pregnant animal should do. "Oh, girl," Doc whispered, moving toward her carefully. "Oh, my girl. It's going to be okay. I'm here. I'm right here." He brought blankets from the corner of the barn. He brought the lantern and set it on the wooden post, filling the barn with yellow light. He had delivered foals before, many years ago when he was younger and had more animals. He knew what needed to happen. He knew what could go wrong. The mare groaned again, and Doc saw her body tighten with another wave of pain. Something was wrong. The labor was hard, too hard. The foal wasn't coming easy. Doc knelt down beside her, speaking in that same soft voice he had been using for 3 weeks. "Easy, Mama. Easy. Your baby is coming. Your baby is almost here. You can do this. You're so strong. So strong." The night crawled by like a dying thing. Minutes felt like hours. The mare would rest, breathing heavy, and then another wave would come and her whole body would go tight with the work of labor. Sweat poured off her. Her muscles trembled. And through it all, her eyes watched Doc like he was the only real thing in the world. Like as long as she could see him, as long as he was speaking to her in that gentle voice, she could survive. The first light of dawn was creeping through the barn cracks when it happened. The mare gave one final, desperate groan. Her body arched. And suddenly, a foal came sliding into the world in a rush of fluids and struggle. It landed in the straw, wet and twisted and fighting for breath. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the foal took a breath. And then another. Its small body shuddered with the effort of living. And then it opened its eyes. Doc felt tears come down his face. He didn't stop them. There was no one to see him cry. There was only the barn and the dawn and the miracle of new life. The foal was small but perfect. It was dark-colored, nearly black, with just a white star on its forehead. Its legs were long and fragile-looking, like they might break if the world was too rough. But as Doc watched, the foal tried to stand. It fell. It tried again. Fell again. But it kept trying, driven by something deep and wild inside. The mare, exhausted beyond measure, lifted her head. Her breathing slowed. She watched her baby with eyes that had changed completely. The emptiness was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was something so powerful, so pure, that Doc had to look away from it. It was love in its most raw and honest form. The foal finally stood on shaking legs and found its mother. It nuzzled against her, searching for milk, for life, for the connection that had kept it alive in the dark. The mare turned her head slightly and breathed on her baby, gentle and careful, as if she was afraid to break this precious new thing. Doc sat in the straw, his old knees bent, his hands trembling. He sat there watching as the light grew stronger through the barn cracks. He sat there until the foal had drunk and fallen asleep against its mother. He sat there until the mare's breathing became steady and peaceful. And in that barn, in the quiet light of a new day on a small forgotten ranch, something had shifted in the world. Something that nobody else would ever know about. Something that would change everything. A broken horse had brought life into the world. And for the first time in years, maybe forever, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 2 months had passed since the foal was born on that dark morning in the barn. 2 months of watching something grow stronger every single day. 2 months of a small miracle becoming a larger one. The foal grew like it was racing against time. Most young horses took months to show real strength and speed. But this one was different. By the 2nd week, it was running in circles around its mother. By the 3rd week, it was faster than foals twice its age. By the 2nd month, watching it move was like watching fire run across the ground. Doc noticed it first in the way the foal moved its legs. There was something perfect about it, something that couldn't be taught or trained. It was born into the animal's body, written into its bones. The foal didn't just run. It flew. Its legs moved with a rhythm and grace that Doc had only seen once before in his entire life, in a champion horse he had worked with 30 years ago. He didn't understand it then. He didn't understand it now. The mare had healed too. Her coat shined like polished leather. Her ribs disappeared under healthy muscle. Her eyes, which had been so empty at the auction, now held warmth and purpose. She was a different animal. She had a reason to live. She had a child to protect. And the foal loved her mother with a fierceness that made Doc smile every single day. The small ranch had become a place of quiet beauty. The fence work that Doc had planned to do that spring got done. The barn got fixed. The animals thrived. And every morning, Doc would stand in the doorway and watch the mare and foal run together in the field, and he would feel like a rich man. He was the richest man on earth, though he still had almost no money. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late summer when the stranger came. Doc was in the field, fixing the water trough, when he saw the dust rising on the road. A horse and rider, moving fast. The rider sat tall in the saddle, dressed in clothes that meant money. Not frontier money, Eastern money. The kind of clothes that belonged in cities with tall buildings and cobblestone streets, not in the hard country of the West. The man stopped his horse at the fence line and looked across the field. Doc straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. Something in his chest felt tight. The stranger dismounted and walked to the fence slowly. He was maybe 50 years old, with a beard that had been carefully trimmed, and eyes that seemed to see everything all at once. He carried himself like a man used to getting what he wanted. His eyes found the foal. The foal was running in wide circles, its mother following at a distance, watching to make sure her baby didn't stray too far. The foal's legs moved with that same perfect rhythm, that same impossible grace. The stranger watched for a long time without speaking. Finally, he turned to Doc. "That horse," he said, pointing his walking stick at the foal. "Where did it come from?" Doc said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence could be a wall, and sometimes a wall was the best answer. The stranger's jaw tightened slightly. "I need to know," he said, and for the first time Doc heard something like desperation in his voice. "That mare. Did any rancher that owned her ever mention her bloodline? Her family history? Anything about where she came from before the local ranches?" Doc still said nothing. The stranger reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder of papers. He held them out over the fence line. "Look," he said. "Just look." Doc took the papers carefully. They were old, some of them yellowed with age. They were filled with names and dates and careful handwriting. He couldn't read all of it. His schooling had been rough and limited, but he could understand the basics. Horse names. Breeding records. Years going back and back. And then he saw it. A name that appeared over and over in the records, going back 15 years, 20 years. A name with notes beside it. Champion bloodline. Prize mare. Stolen, location unknown. The mare's name. Listed as missing. My family. The stranger began, and now Doc could hear the emotion in his voice. Was one of the wealthiest horse breeding families in the East. We raised championship horses. Racehorses. Animals with bloodlines that could be traced back 100 years. This mare, he pointed at the distant animal, was one of our finest breeding stock. She disappeared 15 years ago. Doc looked at the papers again. Dates and breeding information. Champion bloodlines listed across generations. We suspected theft. The stranger continued. One of our workers disappeared at the same time. We think he sold her to a frontier rancher to hide her, to hide the evidence of what he'd done. We've been searching for 15 years. Searching every ranch, every auction, every territory in the West. The stranger's eyes found the foal again. That foal, he said slowly, like each word cost him something, carries the bloodline of 3 champion horses in its veins. That foal is worth more money than you will ever see in your lifetime. More than this entire ranch is worth. That foal could race, could breed, could make someone a fortune. Doc felt the papers become heavy in his hands. I have lawyers, the stranger said. I have documentation. I have legal claim to that mare and everything she produces. That foal is my property. My family's property. And I've been authorized to offer you payment, real payment, enough to change your life, if you sign papers transferring ownership to me right now. Doc looked at the foal. It was running full speed across the field, its legs moving like they were made of wind and lightning. Its mother watched from a distance, still protective, still present. The stranger pulled out another paper from his jacket. A contract. Money written down in numbers that made Doc's head spin. Enough to fix the ranch completely. Enough to hire workers. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of his life. All he had to do was sign. "I'll need an answer," the stranger said. "I have to return to the east by month's end. The family is waiting. Justice is waiting. That horse belongs to us. That foal should belong to us." Doc's hands trembled slightly. The foal had turned and was running toward its mother now, toward safety, toward the one thing in the world that belonged to it completely. The mare nickered softly, a sound of greeting and comfort. And the foal pressed against her side, trusting, unaware that its life, its entire future, was being decided right there on the other side of the fence. "I'll need time," Doc said quietly. "How much time?" the stranger asked. Doc looked at the mare. Her eyes met his. In them, he saw something he had never seen when she first arrived at the auction: hope. Trust. The belief that this broken old man would keep her safe. "I need to think on it," Doc said. The stranger nodded slowly. "I'll be staying in town," he said. "At the hotel. Come find me when you've decided. But don't take too long. Some things can't be waited for forever." He mounted his horse and rode back the way he had come, leaving dust and questions behind him. Doc stood holding the papers, watching the mare and foal run together in the late afternoon light. The words on the pages suddenly felt like fire in his hands. Proof. Claim. Destiny written down in ink and legal language. The foal didn't know it was supposed to be rich. The mare didn't know she was supposed to be owned by someone else. And Doc Harlow stood alone in his field, holding a choice that would change everything forever. Doc Harlow did not sleep that night. He lay in his bed, watching the darkness through his window. The papers from the stranger sat on his table, folded and waiting. The contract with all those numbers. The offer that could change everything. The promise of money, security, and a comfortable life before death came for him. He was an old man. He had maybe 10, 15 years left if God was kind. Maybe less if he wasn't. And in those years, he could have comfort. He could have heat in the winter. He could have good food instead of beans and bread. He could fix the leak in the barn roof that had been there for 3 years. He could pay someone to help with the heavy work. All of that was waiting in those papers. All he had to do was say yes. When morning came, Doc got out of bed without deciding anything. His body moved through the familiar routines like it had a mind of its own. He dressed. He made coffee. He ate breakfast alone at his small table. And the whole time, the papers sat there, folded and patient, waiting for an old man to be sensible. By 10 in the morning, Doc went to the barn. The mare was in her stall, her head resting against the wooden post. She was waiting for him, like she did every morning. The foal was sleeping in the straw, sprawled out in that way young animals sleep when they feel completely safe. One of its back legs was twitching slightly, like it was running in a dream. Doc stood in the barn doorway for a long time without moving. He remembered the first time he saw this mare at the auction. He remembered her empty eyes. He remembered the hollow sound of her breathing, like something inside her had already died even though her body kept moving. He remembered thinking that no amount of kindness could fix what had been broken so deeply. But it had fixed her. Not all at once. Not with words or promises. Just with time and patience and the quiet knowledge that sometimes broken things just need someone to believe they're still worth something. He had believed in her when no one else did. And in believing, he had saved her life. The foal opened one eye and looked at Document. Then it stood, shaky on its long legs, and moved to Doc's side of the fence. It nuzzled his hand, looking for the treats he sometimes brought. Doc had nothing in his pockets today, but the foal didn't mind. It just wanted to be close. It just wanted to know that the old man was still there. Doc's hands trembled as he touched the foal's neck. He could feel the strength in this young animal. He could feel the power that would grow and grow with each passing month. The stranger was right. This foal would be fast. This foal would be worth money. This foal had a bloodline that meant something in the world of champions and breeding and wealth. But looking at the foal, Doc didn't see a fortune. He saw a child. A child that had come into the world in darkness and difficulty. A child that had survived because its mother had fought through pain and fear to bring it to life. A child that trusted Doc with the complete honesty that only animals and small children could manage. A child that had never known cruelty, had never known hunger, had never known anything but safety and love. What would happen to this foal if Doc signed those papers? The stranger had been kind enough. The man wasn't evil. But he was a businessman. He would take the foal to the east, to places where races happened, where money changed hands, where the animal would become a thing of value instead of a thing of love. The foal would run, yes. It would run faster than other horses. But would it run free? Would it run because it wanted to, or because it had been trained to? And what about the mare? The stranger had said he wanted the breeding stock, the mare that carried those championship genes. The mare would be taken to the east too. She would be put into breeding programs. She would have foals, and those foals would be sold. She would spend her life making money for people who saw her as an investment, not as a living creature that had been broken and then healed. Doc walked to the mare's stall and put his hand on her neck. She turned her head and breathed on his face, warm and gentle. She had learned to trust again. She had learned that not all humans were cruel. She had learned that there was such a thing as kindness in the world. If he signed those papers, would she learn to distrust again? The sun climbed higher in the sky. Hours passed. Doc moved through his ranch doing the small tasks that needed doing. He fed the other animals. He fixed a piece of fence. He hauled water. But his mind was not on these things. His mind was in the barn, with the mare and the foal. By afternoon, he sat on the porch steps, looking at the papers. The numbers stared back at him. More money than he had ever seen. More money than he could earn in 10 lifetimes of hard work. Security. Comfort. Peace at the end of his life. It was a good offer. A fair offer. A generous offer. But Doc Harlow had learned something in the last 3 months. He had learned that the most important things in the world could not be bought with money. The most precious things could not be held in your hand or counted or put in a bank. The most valuable things in a human life were the connections you made with other beings. The trust that was given. The love that grew in silence. The sun began to sink toward the horizon. The sky turned orange and gold. The clouds caught fire with the light of the dying day. Doc looked at the papers one more time. He thought about comfort. He thought about security. He thought about all the ways his life would be easier. Then he stood up. He walked to the barn. The mare and foal were standing together in the evening light, looking out the open door toward the fields they loved. The mare's coat shined like copper. The foal looked like it was made of light and speed and endless possibility. Doc took the papers from his pocket. He held them for a moment, feeling their weight in his hands. These papers represented everything the world said he should want. Everything that made sense. Everything that was practical and reasonable and smart. He walked to the barn fire pit where he burned trash sometimes. He had matches in his pocket. His old hands shook as he struck the first match. The paper caught fire, orange and hungry, consuming the words and numbers and legal claims. The smoke rose up into the evening air and was gone. The papers burned until there was nothing left but ash. Doc watched until the last piece of contract turned black and fell apart. When it was done, he turned and looked at the mare and foal. They were still there. Still his. Still free. The choice was made. It was not a choice that made sense. It was not a choice that would bring comfort or security. It was not a choice that any reasonable person would make. But it was the only choice that Doc Harlow could live with. He walked into the barn where the mare waited. She rested her head against his shoulder like she always did. And in that moment, as the sun fell completely below the horizon and darkness began to fill the sky, Doc Harlow understood that he was the richest man who had ever lived. Because he had everything that mattered. And he had chosen to keep it. The stranger came back 3 days later, and his eyes were angry. He rode to Doc's ranch in the morning, and he was not alone. With him came a lawyer from the town, a man with spectacles and papers that rustled like dry leaves. The stranger had a face like a closed fist. He had waited for Doc's decision, and the decision had come in the form of burned papers and an old man who simply said no. "Where are they?" the stranger demanded, not bothering to dismount. "The mare and foal. I want them brought out now." Doc stood on his porch with his hands quiet at his sides. "They're not here," he said simply. "You're lying," the stranger spat. "They were here 2 days ago. Everyone in town knows it. Now bring them out, or I will have the law drag them out myself." The lawyer stepped forward with his papers. "Mr. Harlow, according to these documents, the mare and foal are the rightful property of the Eastern Horse Breeding Company. You are harboring stolen property. If you do not produce the animals immediately, I am authorized to have you arrested and to take everything you own until the debt is settled." Doc said nothing. They searched the ranch. They looked in the barn, the fields, the back pastures. They rode across his land, looking behind every rock, every tree, every possible hiding place. But the mare and foal were gone. Doc had moved them 2 nights before, in the dark, using paths that only he knew. He had taken them to a hidden canyon 10 miles away, a place where the land was rough and the passage hidden by rock walls and overhanging trees. The stranger left that afternoon, furious and empty-handed. The lawyer promised lawsuits and authorities and the full power of the law. But he had no animals to take. He had no proof that Doc had done anything except refuse to cooperate. Within a week, word had spread across the frontier. An old rancher had turned down a fortune. Not for fame. Not for recognition. Not for any reason that made sense to men who lived by profit and loss. He had simply said no to wealth, and in saying no, he had become something the frontier did not often see, a man who could not be bought. People told the story in saloons and around campfires. The old man who burned the papers. The old man who walked away from more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Some people laughed and said he was crazy. Some people said he was a fool. But others, the ones with hardened hearts that still held some tenderness, they understood. They understood that some things mattered more than money. Months passed. Doc's life went on quietly. He fixed his fence. He tended his land. He brought supplies from town, and the townspeople looked at him differently now. Some with pity. Some with respect. Some with a kind of wondering, like they were looking at someone they didn't quite understand. But Doc didn't mind what people thought. Because every 2 weeks, he would ride to the hidden canyon, and he would find the mare and foal thriving in that place. The canyon had good water and fresh grass. It was protected from the harsh winds. And most importantly, it was free. No one owned it. No one could claim it. The horses could run and roam and live as nature intended. The foal grew into a young horse, beautiful, fast, and wild. It never wore a saddle. It never felt a rope around its neck. It ran with its mother across that hidden land, and it knew only freedom and safety. The mare, fully healed now, was like a different animal than the broken thing that had come to the auction. She was strong. She was confident. She was a mother protecting her child. A year passed. Then 2 years. The stranger never came back. The lawyers gave up their claims. The frontier moved on to other stories, other dramas, other reasons to talk around evening fires. Doc Harlow became just an old man again, someone people noticed less and less as time went on. But in the bars and homes and ranches across 3 counties, the story never quite died. People told it to their children. They told it to explain what courage really looked like. Not the kind of courage that comes from fighting or standing tall, but the kind that comes from making the hard choice when everyone else says you're wrong. The kind of courage that means walking away from everything the world says you should want, because you know what you really need. Ranchers who had been brutal to their animals began to treat them differently. Mothers who had never thought much about kindness began teaching their children to care for creatures that couldn't care for themselves. The story spread like wind, changing people in small ways they couldn't quite explain. And in a hidden canyon where no one else went, a horse that had been worthless at an auction lived free. That horse had never known that it was supposed to be valuable. It had never known that its blood was worth money. It knew only that it was loved. It knew only that it was safe. It knew only that the world could be a place of gentleness instead of cruelty. 5 years after the foal was born, Doc Harlow died quietly in his sleep. The town gave him a funeral. People came from 3 counties to remember him. The preacher spoke about kindness. The townspeople spoke about his choices. And when it was over, people left flowers on his grave and shook their heads in wonder at a man who had had everything and chosen to have nothing, and in that choice had gained everything that mattered. But the real ending to the story didn't happen in town. It happened in a hidden canyon, where a young horse that had grown into a beautiful mare, the daughter of the broken horse from the auction, ran free with her mother. A man Doc had trusted came to the canyon sometimes, leaving food and checking on them, keeping his promise to watch over them until the end. The young mare never knew she was a champion. She never knew her bloodline was worth fortune. She knew only that she ran fast because running fast felt like flying. She knew only that she stayed close to her mother because that was love. She knew only that the world was big and wild and full of possibility. She was free in a way that no horse raised in captivity could ever understand. And somewhere, in the way stories live forever on the frontier, people would tell about the old man who burned the papers. The old man who understood that the measure of a life was not in what you owned, but in what you loved. The old man who proved that even in a hard world of money and profit and endless wanting, a person could still choose to be good. On quiet evenings, when the sun fell and the stars came out, people would look at their own horses and remember Doc Harlow. And some of them, just some, would understand what he had understood all along. That loyalty changes destiny. That silence speaks louder than words. That even the weakest moment can become legendary. And that sometimes, the greatest riches in the world are the ones you can never buy or sell. They are the ones you simply choose to keep.